Welcome back to the Box Brothers podcast. He is Nick Perez, I'm Ben Perez, and today we are reviewing the British GP. Nick, there was just a lot of chaos in this race, a lot of drivers going out, a lot of crashes. Lando Norris takes home the win, and our boy Nico Hulkenberg coming home on the podium, first time in his 237 races at the ripe old age of 37. Bringing it home. He didn't even know what to do with the trophy. It was backwards when he got on the podium and was trying to show the crowd. But Nick, let's start there and let's talk about Nico Hulkenberg and his drive today, because frankly, that was probably the highlight of my race.
You know, it really just shows that anything could happen in a race weekend. And I think that's like the intriguing part about F1, especially it being a wet weather race. It always leads to a lot more excitement in the end and a big shakeup on the grid. I mean, heck, we even had Lance Stroll rolling in through fourth. Like, that's unheard of in any other sport. So I just feel like that's the beauty of F1 right there. It was wonderful.
Yeah, I don't think that we do have another sport that you can go from first to last in this quick of a time span. I mean, you have upsets in football, you have upsets in baseball, basketball, but to actually have it matter for the World Constructors Championship, this is probably the only sport that does it, because Nico brings home 15 points this week. And in the constructors standings, that's probably the biggest jump, because they went from, I'm pulling it up right now. Let's do constructors standings. Yeah, they went from minus 15, so at 26 before this race. And they hopped up to 41. So they were in ninth before today, and they hopped up to sixth place, about 18 points behind Williams right now, who
see, that's insane.
They kept it clean. But yeah, I think this is the most wild race to do that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it just shows the consistency that he drove today, no matter the changing weather conditions throughout the multiple virtual safety cars and the multiple actual safety cars. It just showed just more like resolve, calm, composure to just be able to be in striking distance and then be able to do the stuff to actually win the race, because there was a chance that he could have lost it in any single corner to just shunt the car at the end of the race. So it just showed real just competentness. And I mean, you would hope for that for one of the oldest drivers on the grid, but it really was just a masterclass of just staying consistent and waiting for the opportunity to happen.
Yeah, Nick, and he did capitalize on his opportunity today. I think the most disappointing is his teammate Gabriel Bortoleto. After having some amazing race weekends, that crash hurt me after he went off. I forget which turn it was, but hit the barriers, got it going a little bit again, and then just had to retire the car.
So he went off on turn 2, and he just caught the littlest bit of the paint on the curb, and that just spun him on a really, really greasy track. And the craziest part about it now is that the marshals are really cracking down on cars rejoining and spreading debris all over the track. So I don't know if you caught it on the broadcast, but they were saying they've been cracking down on teams to stop doing that, even though he could have made it back to the pit straight. But it was just kind of gut-wrenching because it happened out of nowhere, and he was on a really good race so far this weekend.
Yeah. He looked quick, and we'll drop him a little bit in the Grid Rival Fantasy League. So I might pick him up for like a 5-race contract, because I think that Kick Sauber is going to be competing in the midfield, because them and Aston Martin have really made a jump over these last couple of weeks. And we can talk about Stroll really showing an impressive turnaround. He was running in third for about a third of the race. And then once Lewis Max Pierre, Hulk really got going, he dropped like a stone, but still like a 7th place finish, coming home ahead of Fernando Alonso, which I think is the first time in an entire year that he has done that. Was very impressive by Lance Stroll.
Yeah, and if you heard the team radio, Fernando was pissed. He was like,
so angry.
How is Lance in third? He was like, how is Lance in third? Like, I don't understand this. We've made all the same strategy calls. but he was so upset that Lance was doing better than him. I just thought that part was super funny. And then he made the jump, Fernando did. He made the jump to dries relatively really early, and that inspired Russell to do it too. And I'll speak more on the Russell part later, but the immediately going to softs was not the best play when the track was still relatively wet. So it was very interesting to see the dynamic in that relationship really get exposed this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I would be pissed too if my partner was Lance Stroll and I was Fernando Alonso and he was doing better than me in the race. That's embarrassing is probably the best word. It has been the laughing stock, and I would just be so embarrassed, rightfully so. Like, I understand Fernando Alonso being as angry as he was, but in these wet weather races, really anything can happen. And we saw it in Silverstone when K-Mag got his pole and then dropped like a rock once we hit the race. But yeah, it's a fluky situation, so I don't expect this to become the standard, but good on Lance for taking a hold of his opportunity and calling it more so the right strategy than driving a fantastic race. But he kept it out of the wall, and that's more than what 6 of the drivers could say, 5 of the drivers.
Yeah, 5 of them. What was I gonna say?
Putting it into the wall, wet weather, any of the above.
No, I was gonna say that it was just it was very much a fluke of a race for a lot of teams, and a lot of mistakes that happened wouldn't happen in other circuits. I want to throw it down the grid to Alpine and talk about the masterclass Pierre Gasly's been on. He's been in Q3 like the past 5 weeks. Hasn't stepped down in his qualifying. He's been in the top 10 or bottom of the top 10 for the past couple weeks, and it's just been really impressive to see Pierre do that, and for Pierre to race really well with Max Verstappen, Hamilton, and the Mercedes throughout the race. I just thought that was it showed how good of a driver Pierre was.
Yeah,
and has been this past couple weeks.
Yeah, and Pierre was fighting with Hamilton for a lot of the race. Hamilton finally got his move made on Pierre, which allowed him to get up to 4th. But yeah, kudos for Pierre. We all know that Pierre has a amazing race in him. That's not the question. It's, can he do it consistently? And in this Alpine, he hasn't been able to show his pace like he was able to show in the Racing Bulls in the past. But I will give Pierre his roses because today, in the extreme conditions, the ever-changing conditions, he was able to bring it home and get Alpine a good points finish, especially after Colapinto crashed in the first or second lap.
I thought he didn't even start the race.
When did Colapinto crash?
I didn't think he started the race.
Was it?
Unless he did crash. I don't know. He crashed. He qualifying, but I didn't think he started today.
Yeah, he did start today. He went out on lap 1. Yeah. Gabriel Bortoleto was the one that crashed in qualifying.
No, Colapinto did.
No, Gabby did.
Hold on.
Because he must have hit Liam Lawson, because Liam Lawson also started today. Well, okay. So you are correct. You are correct that
it doesn't
Franco
matter,
crashed. Yeah, Franco crashed in qualifying. Liam Lawson crashed in the first lap of the race.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't think he left the pit.
Yeah, I was wrong on that one. But yeah, so I mean, I think this marks the end of his F1 career. I really do think that they will sign a more experienced driver like Bottas to just keep it out of the wall for the rest of the season.
That would be a very interesting dynamic to have, Pierre and Bottas, and then to see them kick out 2 rookies with not even 10 races in. It'd just be kind of crazy.
Yeah, I mean, they're too crash happy. Both Doohan and Franco just can't keep it out of the wall. Like, I understand that it's harsh to cut 2 rookies. Franco, I could see coming a little bit. Jack Doohan was more of an unknown at the beginning of the season. But, I mean, if you're crashing every other race, like, those expenses add up, and you can't do that in F1, especially in this cost cap era.
Yeah. Another thing, and this is going to kind of be off topic, but going back to I remember what I had to say about the Aston Martins. It kind of reminded me of the F1 movie in Plan C, that Stroll was up in third place and Alonso was back and he kept pitting for different tires, I was like, oh no, they're about to have Crashgate all over again. So I thought that was like a funny call out to the F1 movie. Moving along to Mercedes.
I was just going to say they did not bring out the black flag for Fernando Alonso helping out his teammate.
Yeah. And speaking of Fernando Alonso, he was one of the first to switch to softs, and George was on the phone going like, hey guys, I really think that I could pull off softs. The team was like, oh, the track's still very wet. We see Fernando go into the pits, then George follows him. George gets on the softs, first lap, spins it across the S's, like near the hangar straight, and it just cuts to Toto in the garage in his like 1920s bowler hat, just sitting there staring at the screens, and just head goes down, face palms, and it may have made me crack up. It was the funniest thing ever. So I was like, he's thinking Max Verstappen isn't going to do this. I just thought it was a very funny moment to have happen.
I don't know. Max probably, like, if Max did that strategy, he might have done a 720 similar to George. But like you just said, Toto was in disbelief. We still have not heard the final news. They did not announce Russell's contract during the British Grand Prix, which gives me pause and gives me suspicion that the Sky Italy rumors might be more true than people initially thought that they were.
Yeah, 100%. And that's probably the place to announce it at. But did George finish in the points today?
Yeah, he came in.
I could not remember.
Yeah, he got 1 point today for a 10th place finish. Finishing right behind Alonso and right in front of Ollie Behrman.
Yeah, my Ollie Behrman pick almost hit. But no, you could just see the pain in Toto's face, that he was really reeling after this, just the massive loss in points. Especially their closest fight right now is with Max Verstappen. Just the whole Mercedes team is just their closest competition is Max, or Team Max. So it really does shed a light that he was only able to pick up 1 point after Antonelli was rammed into the back of by Hadjar.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because that was probably my most memorable. I'll steal that from Matt and Tommy in P1. But my most memorable moment of the race was definitely Hadjar and Antonelli, because it was right after the torrential rainstorm that just dropped buckets on the racetrack, and you couldn't see anything on the track. Like, it's ridiculous that they were even driving. And I know I'm probably a little bit more heated because I had both Isaac and Antonelli on my team for my fantasy, and I had Isaac in one of my picks on Grid Rival. But like, Isaac couldn't see Antonelli before he turned into him on the corner. Like, the spray was that bad. And I know people complain and bitch about red flagging during wet weather racing, that we should be able to race. But if you can't see the car that's 10 feet in front of you, like, it's an unsafe condition to race the car. And I know we have the halo and we have all of these extra safety measures, but I don't know what Isaac could have done differently in those conditions that he was racing in.
Yeah. I mean, it was bad, because even when like you're watching the TV, you couldn't see what was happening on track. It was just all spray. And I had my phone set up with Max Verstappen's onboard, and it was just, you couldn't see anything. And then we cut to the yellow flags. We see Hadjar on the wall, and then it shows his onboard, and his onboard's high. It's on the top end of the car. So that already you could barely see. You couldn't see Antonelli until he had hit Antonelli. That's when you finally saw the red lights. But him being in the cockpit of the car, the visibility's worse than what we saw on the camera up top above the spray a little bit. So there was just no possible way he could have avoided that crash.
Yeah, and it makes me so frustrated that for all of these years, they probably would have red flagged it, but because fans and everyone is like, we need to race in wet weather conditions, they put him out on unsafe terrain that you can't avoid a crash that in wet weather or in dry weather you would have been able to.
100%.
So like it just made me frustrated because I think Hajar and Kimi, I don't know if they would have gotten into the points, but they definitely would have pushed down Esteban Ocon and Yuki Tsunoda during this race. I have faith that at least one of them would have been able to come home in that 12th, 13th, 11th spot.
You're not a big Esteban Ocon fan. I've noticed this.
No,
you really don't like Esty.
No, I do not like Esty Bestie. That's why I chose Oliver Behrman over Esteban Ocon. I just think, one, we also saw it with today. One of my biggest problems with Esteban Ocon is he is not a good teammate. And I understand in F1, you are racing your teammate and that's the person that you are compared most against. So you are in equal machinery or like extremely similar machinery. Your setups might change, but you're essentially compared to your teammate. And Esteban Ocon has shown not only at Haas, but at Alpine before this and Racing Points before this, that he will fight tooth and nail. And I get it because of his background, but he crashes into his teammates more so than anyone else on the grid. And we saw it again today that he hit Oliver Behrman coming around a corner and it spun out both teammates on. And I wrote it down because I was like, this is absolutely ridiculous that Esteban Ocon is in another collision with a teammate. And it is lap.
Do you have the number of teammate collisions he's had?
Probably in the double digits now, but lap 43, I wrote the Haas boys collide. And that's why I don't like Esteban Ocon, is because he hit his own teammates, which is detrimental to a teammate driver. And that's why I think once his contract's up at Haas, I think he's out of F1 because I don't know who's going to want to sign someone that is going to crash into his own teammate.
No,
do you think
I
that he keeps
that. And I just don't think there's that much upside on him. And I've never really liked Esteban Ocon. He has always been someone to crash a lot, someone to complain a lot. And he doesn't help the team game, like you were saying. And it was funny because the last time two Haas teammates had collided was the British Grand Prix with Kevin Magnussen and Roman Grosjean. And it was funny because I was scrolling on TikTok before the race started, and I saw like it was a live stream, but it was a previous year's Grand Prix. But I saw the two Haas's run into each other, and I like swiped out of it. And I was like, "Oh wait, did the race already start?" No, the race hadn't started. It was from the last time the Haas had collided into each other. So I was like, "Oh man, that'd be crazy if that happened again today." And then cut to lap whatever it was of them actually colliding again, and it was such a dumb collision too, because like Behrman was ahead of Ocon. It was just a dumb wreck to have happen. Yeah. So,
and if
really
that wreck
don't
doesn't
know
happen,
what's going on?
Well, if that wreck doesn't happen, then Oliver could be competing with George because he was only 2 seconds behind him at the end of the race.
Mm-hmm.
And with how poor the Mercedes looked today, it definitely was on.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Nick,
now,
let's transition to the top of the grid.
Yep, that's what I was going to say.
All right. Well, lead us in then.
Well, jumping up to the top of the grid, and the most impressive part of the weekend was the McLarens, and the elephant in the room is their penalty. But I have to say, before their penalty in the first safety car, before that safety car was thrown out there, Oscar had a 15-second lead after taking it from Max Verstappen. And it was great on him to stick with Max, but that car just looked hard to drive today, especially with him going for the low downforce setup, really anticipating to get out in the lead and just keep it. But the rain happened, wasn't able to let Max get out there. So when Oscar took control of the race, he was dominant. And when he got after that first safety car, build up his lead again, Max wasn't going to be able to touch him. Max is just going to fight with Lando for second place. Second safety car gets thrown out there, and it looked like very, very weird timing because the pit straight the pit entrance is right there, and the safety car leaves, and Oscar slams on the brakes. And I don't think anybody else was anticipating him to slam that violently. So then Max shoots off, Lando shoots off from behind him, and then they keep going. And it was kind of just a weird situation to have happen. So it definitely raised up a lot of questions. I think the 10-second time penalty was a bit over dramatic, but it's because Max spun before the restart happened. So the stewards blamed Piastri for Max's spin, so they penalized him for that. So it was just a very interesting penalty to have happen. Lando drove a great race too and made all of the right calls.
Yeah, I think I don't know if it was too harsh of a race. I was a little bit late to actually watching the race, so I was on delay, and you had called me during this moment of Oscar's penalty. So I think any safety car infringement from the F1 TV's announcers is a 10-second penalty because they don't want any of that to continue for future races. So they want to establish the precedent in this one and make sure that no one does anything funny, because we've seen in the past that drivers have tried to slow down to allow other drivers to pass over a safety car and get a penalty point. For example, George Russell is probably the most recent example of this, slamming on his brakes, trying to get Max his 12th penalty point so that he is disqualified from the next race. So it's not uncommon. It just happened that Piastri was the one who got caught doing that infringement. So it did hurt him for the race. And I know even Nico Hulkenberg had mentioned it when Oscar asked him about this in the cool down room about, I had just hit the brakes really hard once the lights came back off. And Nico Hulkenberg was like, yeah, it kind of messed me up even back in the midfield because I didn't really know what was going on, and then just had to slam on his brakes and get out of the way. So even the rest of the grid was affected by it. So it was a harsh penalty, but I think Oscar is going to learn from this. Oscar looked really good. And if I had to put a prediction down for who actually takes home the title at the end of the year, I do think that it's going to be Oscar over Lando.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I know
Lando's biggest fan.
I know I glazing him really hard last week. And I think what makes me say this is even when Lando had won the race and he was getting interviewed by Jenson Button afterwards, I had made a note of the comments because I had watched it twice. Once with me, and then Liz had to leave the room, came back in and watched the last 30 laps of the race with her. But Lando, when he was being interviewed by Jenson Button, Jenson was like, so how did you feel? And he was like, yeah, I just didn't want to muck it up. And I'm really happy that I won this race, and you never know when it will happen again, but I'm just going to savor this moment. And I get where he's coming from with that. But the worrying about mucking it up really stood out to me, because it means that he's worrying about what he could do wrong. And I know there's an old baseball analogy that if you think about how many times that you're going to miss the baseball, you're never going to be able to hit the baseball. And it just seemed like a really odd mindset for someone who's competing for the World Drivers' Championship, that instead of just going after and taking it, it seems like he's resigned to whatever happens in the universe, and then just being thankful for the race win. I felt like, why would he not expect to be up there next year, especially with Mercedes engines being the aerodynamics, and Andrea Silva, his team, doing well, and Zach Brown, they seem in a prime spot to continue this excellence moving forward into the future. So it's just a really odd thing to say from someone who had just won the race.
Yeah, 100%. And I don't know. Lando has always kind of been oh man, I hope I don't mess it up. Well, Oscar drove angry that last couple, and without that spin that he had, it probably would have been a little bit of a race. I think he would have gotten into a closer deficit, maybe around 2 seconds, instead of staying where he was at, because he was on a stormer. He cut into Lando's time gap by 3 seconds, and then he spun out. And I don't know. Oscar just looked really, really good today, and the cards just didn't go his way. So It's just very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think if it was a dry weather race, Oscar would have ran away with this, probably with over 30 seconds.
No.
Oscar
I'll tell you
wouldn't
what would
have
happen.
driven away with it?
Segueing. No. If that's a dry weather race, Max is getting out to lead. If after he kept it after the first corner, and if he pits well, Max wins the race. Because there's no way you can make up that deficit, especially in the straights here. If it was a dry race and Max got out to the lead that he originally had, if that was anything but a wet weather race, Max would have won the race.
All right, fair.
Because no one could touch his car.
You were segueing, though? Yeah.
Yeah, I was segueing into talking about Team Max Verstappen. So Team Max really just, we didn't even hear about Yuki. We did not hear one thing about Yuki. Yuki wasn't on a different strategy. Yuki wasn't on a fun strategy to try to at least do something. We didn't hear about Yuki the whole time. Team Max just rolled out there. And I mean, it was really interesting to see him spin after that whole safety car thing. I had my hands on my head. I was like, oh no. But the ability for him to react to that, because they had, who was it? Someone was in the commentary box, but they had raced before. They were talking about how difficult it is to do what Max just did right there. Because when he started the spin, a lot of drivers will slam on the brakes and keep their foot on the brakes. Max feathered the brake and let all of his tires regain traction and then be able to hop right back in to the race and only lose about 5 positions. They said that was incredibly difficult to do, especially at the point where he did it on the racetrack. It's very easy to find the wall right there. So I just think that if he's able to do this in probably what is a lower midfield car right now, it makes me excited to see how good he can be. And we've seen Max with the best car. And granted, it's really, really boring when Max has the best car. I think the same thing goes for Lewis Hamilton too. But when Max has the best car, he's winning races by laps compared to second place, 40 seconds compared to second place. And I long for a time where we go back to 2021. And in that 2021 season, it was super duper cool because Lewis and Max would finish 40 seconds on a consistent basis ahead of everybody else. They'd be 1 and 2, and they would be 40 seconds ahead of everybody else because they had the 2 best cars on the grid. So it just makes me interested to see if Mercedes can make a good car, and if Max goes to Mercedes and he's able to compete with the McLarens in equal machinery, what that battle would look like.
I'm here for it. I think we have 2 weeks off this next upcoming week. We come back for my birthday race weekend, 25th through 27th. And then we have another 3-week break for the August break. So I think within one of those 2 timeframes, the announcement will be made on what's happening with Mercedes. So if they can make a deal, I'm super excited for the potential that you just laid out of equal machinery and Max Verstappen in that race car, that we can see him back up at the top of the grid. So Nick, moving down the grid, anything to say on the people that we haven't really talked about? Lewis Hamilton ran a great race, just got caught out by some strategy. If anyone were to have taken Lewis's spot on the podium, I am happy that it was Nico Hulkenberg. Kudos to Nico. I think Lewis ran a really good race and had an opportunity to be up there, but just came up a little bit short. Albon, good race, came back in the points, bounced back a little. That was probably about all that Williams had this week. Mm-hmm. And then everyone else we've kind of talked about. Any other party notes on the race itself?
I don't.
All right. Well, yeah, I don't either. So it was a chaotic race. Enjoyed Silverstone. There were on-track battles. I think the biggest news of this week was the wet weather racing, Oscar's penalty, and then Nico Hulkenberg's maiden podium. But it was a fun race nonetheless, even if I was very disappointed that Hajar and Kimi came together and crashed out with each other.
100%.
All right. Well, let's get into our predictions and see how well we did this week next.
Is it a Lego trophy? Hey, did they give him a Lego did he get a Lego trophy?
Who? Everyone?
Nico, was that the trophy? Was it Lego? It was a Lego trophy.
I'm
oh man, that's crazy.
Yeah, they are Lego trophies. That's super cool. Because I saw Matt and Tommy do a little Lego presentation, or their podcast was presented by Lego this week. I'll take
man.
that trophy.
Well, if you
That's
notice,
super
all like
cool.
the distance boards, yeah, all the distance boards were Lego themed.
All the what were Lego?
All like the like 300 meters, 200 meters, 100 meters for the braking distances were all Lego themed.
Cool. All right, Nick, you ready to get into our predictions?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, Nick, this week, let's get into our predictions. Every week we choose a top 10 finisher, a teammate battle, and a top 10 or a podium finishers. So this week, Nick, you went with Oliver Behrman, and he finished 10th this week, right outside the points. He was looking good. I think that 10th place grid penalty that he did have hurt him the most because on Saturday he was on a flyer, made it to Q3, and looked really poised to take home some points for Haas this week.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it's just a bummer. Just a bummer location to have it happen at. He was still raced a great race, and I feel like he would have beat George if it wasn't for Esteban Ocon.
Yeah. So I'm sorry you missed on him. I also missed on my pick. I chose Isaac Hajar, and in that wet weather, not being able to see Kimi Antonelli again, just disappointed in that race result. But moving on to the teammate battle, you chose Kimi Antonelli over George Russell, and that did not hit this week after Isaac just yeeted Kimi's car.
Man, it's been a tough race so far. Or tough what's it called so far? Tough luck. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, back-to-back DNF. So hopefully, once we come back after 2 or 3 weeks, he can bring it back up in Belgium. I went with Oliver Behrman over Esteban Ocon, and that did hit. And that is a +2 for choosing the second Haas team. I don't know after this if Ollie will stay second, but kudos to Ollie for finishing ahead of Esteban Ocon. And then moving down to the podium, Nick, you had Lewis in first, which did not hit. Their pace just wasn't anywhere qualifying. And I think that was the most bizarre. They brought it up in Q2, but then it disappeared again in Q3. And Lewis was almost out in Q1, which was probably the oddest thing. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah. I mean, they looked good throughout practices, but when it came down to the wet weather, they just didn't really find the pace in the car. And Lewis all of a sudden decided to wake up towards the last 20 laps of the race. He just was like, it's time to race a car again. So it just was one of those interesting things that happened.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. You did have Piastri coming home in second, so you do get a point there. And then Max, you had coming home third, so you missed out on that. And then I had Lando coming home first. That did hit, so that's a point. I rode the hot hand of Lewis coming home in second, which did not hit. And then George just made some bad tire calls or untimely tire calls, and he kind of drove himself out of that race. So that was not
stupid tire calls.
Very bad tire calls. And then let's get to our grid rival picks, locks of the week. And you had Hamilton doing better than 4.5, which did hit. But you had Lando coming home worse than 2, which did not hit. And then I had SD Bestie finishing worse than 14.5, which did not hit. But I did hit on Yuki Tsunoda coming home worse than 13.5. So 50-50 this week. We should have just combined our Hamilton and Yuki bets or Yuki picks.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that does it for our competition. The competition was 8-7 with 3 points for me. That brings me up to 11, and Nick comes up to 8 points. So it's 11-8 midway through the season, Nick. So we still have a lot of racing to go. This could easily turn either way. So I'm not counting you out at all. But now for our final segment of the day, let's get into blind rank these liveries, Nick. I'm super excited for this, and we will bring that up next. Vroom. Share my screen. All right. So today, I have 5 spots for you. You just have to blind rank these liveries that I have chosen for you. And today we are starting off with the Racing Bulls livery for this week. Graffiti from Nigerian British artist Slon, which I think is a A super dope livery. But where are you ranking it on 1 through 5? You only have 5 spots.
1 through 5? I mean, I do think it's really, really cool. I kind of get lost on it sometimes, but I have a feeling that you have much better liveries there. So I'm going to go with 4.
Oh, throwing Racing Bulls down in 4. Okay. So next up on our list, we're going to go with the Nickelodeon slime version of Steak. Displayed this for the Miami GP.
I mean, it kind of just looks like their normal livery. So I'm going to put it down in 5.
All right. Throwing the slime livery down in 5. Next up, we have the camo version of Red Bull, one of probably the most myth and hyped up liveries. Cool geometric design. I think it's one of the coolest ones that has ever been displayed.
Oh, yeah. So the story behind this one it's actually one from testing. So they used to throw it on there so you couldn't see all the aerodynamics, and it photographed really, really weirdly. I'm going to have to put this one at number 2 because I feel like there's going to be something else. So I have 1 and 3 remaining left for me. So I'm going to put down. Right, I do love this livery a lot. I thought it was going to be their blacked out camo from a couple other years.
Yeah, well, we can play this game again because there's a lot of liveries, and I think this is a really cool segment to do. So up next, we have the chromed out McLaren from this weekend. I think that this one's really cool. I love how shiny it is, and especially when the sun's out, it's super reflective, so it looks like there's nothing there.
I really wish they gave me more chrome, but I do like the livery a lot. It's not my favorite, but I definitely did enjoy it seeing it out on track this weekend. So I'm going to put that one at my 3.
Okay, so throwing the chrome at number 3. I agree with you. They should have this completely chromed out, and it would be a 10 out of 10. This is probably a 7 out of 10 right now. Mm-hmm. And then finally, Nick, on the list today, we are coming in with the half HP, half Ferrari as your number 1 today.
Oh, no. Oh, no. I should have put the Red Bull at number 1. Oh, man. But I guess that's what happens when you blind rank. I feel like a full blued out Ferrari would be pretty cool. But knowing Ferrari, we would never get that. But, oh, man, that's kind of a bummer. That's the one I get.
Yeah, I'm sorry that this list fell this way. I agree that if they would have just done a full blue HP and then had a little like Ferrari emblem on the side, that would have made this 10 times cooler.
Yeah, it would have been like Lightning McQueen and Dynaco. So I don't know. It's definitely interesting, but Ferrari would never fully commit to a bit. So, but it is what it is.
It is what it is. So, Nick, that wraps it up for us today. Any final closing thoughts for the people today?
Nope. I just think someone slammed into the back of me. I think I'm going to have to box and retire the car. Box.
Yeah, and please go like our stuff. Go follow us on Instagram. Go subscribe to us on YouTube. We are now on TikTok as well. Go comment, like our podcast wherever you may be listening. We really appreciate the support, and it does help our algorithm. So until we meet again, Nick, we will do an episode or 2 in the bye weeks. But until we meet again, thanks for the box, and we will see everyone in the next one. Peace.